Okay, hi there. It's time for the next Virgil Aeneid Book 12 video. We've had a couple of them so far. The first one was an introductory one, giving you the background and kind of the context of Book 12 and this single combat, which has arisen because the Trojans have landed in Italy, but the Rutuli are already there, and essentially there is a land and a sovereignty dispute. That was the first video. The second video covered off the bull simile. And the kind of reaction of Jupiter as he weighs up the two men's fates, and finished with Turnus striking Aeneas with his sword. That's where we got to. That's line 730. This video coming up is going to be the hardest one of the whole thing. It's going to be really, really unpleasant. Okay, as I sit in here, in my study with the sun beating in, there's a million things I'd rather be doing, frankly, than going through this. This is really quite hard, but it's important. It's critical, actually. That you know the word order and that you know how this unravels. Because once you do, the Aeneid exam is going to be very, very easy. Okay, so let's get through it. This is going to be quite long. If you're going to watch any video more than once, I would recommend it be this one, because this is the hardest Latin of the whole passage. Okay, so let's get through it. Et ferit, so Annie strikes. That was where Turnus struck Aeneas with his sword. Okay, exclamant, so the Trojans, that's our first nominative. The Trojans shout out, and let's go to the adjective first, and the scared Latins shout out. And the battle lines of both sides are recti, and we have to imagine there's a sunt there. So the battle lines of both sides bristle. Bristle means having your hair standing on end in fear. So they shudder would be a good translation. Okay, if you want a slightly more common word than bristle. Okay, next bit. But the treacherous sword. So this is the sword which Turnus has used to strike Aeneas. Breaks. And it, so this is the sword, it deserts the burning one. Now that's accusative, ardentem. It's a present participle. You can tell from the em here, it's accusative. It's referring to Turnus. So we would probably need to put Turnus in here to make it make sense. So let's go back. And it deserts burning Turnus in mid strike. Okay, that's how that works. And then we have this really quite complex clause. I think even people at A2 level would struggle to translate this, so don't try and do it literally. It's got grammatical features which are above GCSE. So the thing you have to remember is ni is short for nisi, so it means unless or except. Here we're going to use except. So except flight, except escape. Subiat is a subjunctive verb, not a type you'll see at GCSE. So that's why I say don't worry. And subsidio means support or help, literally. So he subiat, he undergoes help apart from flight. It's a very kind of rough literal. It doesn't even quite work in English. That gives you an idea of what the words mean. So subiat subsidio, there is no source of help. So nothing now remains, I think would be a good translation. Except, apart from, escape. Okay, hopefully you can now see how your translation's working there. That is quite hard. It does get a little bit easier as we go on, so let's push on very quickly. He flees, so this is Turnus still. He flees, more swift than the east wind. When he saw the unknown capulum, so the unknown hilt of the sword. So if you can imagine, the sword is broken and he's left holding the handle. Well, that's what he looks at now. That's the capulum. So the unknown hilt, and his right hand, which is unarmed. So in other words, the now broken sword is useless. Okay, but inerne means unarmed. Okay, this next bit is pretty tricky. So farmer est, yeah. What we've got is there is a rumour. That's what farmer est means. There is a rumour. And what we have after farm est is a huge and really quite complex indirect statement. So there is a rumour that praecipitem is our accusative. Okay, that then feeds down here to rapuisse. That's our infinitive, and the rest of it is basically meat. It's filling in between the praecipitem, which is the accusative, and the rapuisse, which is the infinitive. So really, really, really hard. We're going to break it down into its individual parts, okay? And then I'll go through these three lines and just put them together in a minute, all as one. So there is a story, there is a version of events that Turnus, we need to understand that Turnus is the subject here of this accusative. His name's not mentioned, but it's him we're talking about. So there is a story that I'm going to say Turnus. There is a story that Turnus headlong, so fired with passion, that's what praeceps means, headlong, when he was mounting horses, first joined into the battles. So we would say first joined for battle. That's a good translation for that. With the sword belonging to his father having been left behind. So I would translate that after he'd left behind his father's sword. While he is excited, he snatched the sword of his charioteer Metiscus. Okay, now let's put that all together because that's really, really quite hard, but hopefully that unravels the word order. There is a story that Turnus headlong snatched the sword of his charioteer Metiscus when he was mounting his horses, which had been joined initially in Prolia for battle. After he had left behind his father's sword while he was excited. Full stop. Okay, so hopefully you can see how that fits together. Again, any questions on any aspect of this or anything else, send me an email and we can go through it. But that should make sense now. Okay, this is a continuation of, why did Turnus not know he had the wrong sword, according to this this farmer, this version of events. So que and id, it. So this this different sword, the sword of his charioteer Metiscus. So and id, it sufficed. It was enough for a long time. While he was giving the Palantia Terga Toikri. So while he was giving Palantia, basically defeated backs of the Trojan. So while he was basically cutting down Trojans as they were running away, that's the literal meaning. Sorry, that's not the literal meaning. That's what the Latin means. The literal meaning, while he was giving Palantia Terga. Terga is backs. Palantia is agreeing with backs. So while he was giving the Palantia, the kind of opened up backs of the Trojan. Palantia, very rare word indeed. Okay. Postquam armadei ad volcania ventum est. Okay, so that's why he doesn't know the sword is different, because all the time he's dealing with normal Trojans, i.e. not Aeneas, he doesn't notice because the sword is working, he is killing people, he doesn't think to kind of take a close look at his sword, he's very happy with how it's working and just, is focused on the more important things like, staying alive on the one hand and killing his opponents on the other. Okay. But there is a problem. He's going to come into contact with Aeneas, and that's when his weaponry is going to come into focus as being insufficient. So, postquam, after. Ventum est is an impersonal phrase. Literally, it was come. So we would say, after he came. So after he came towards the volcanic arms of a god. In other words, weaponry made by the god Vulcan. Vulcan is, the Greek name is Hephaestus. Vulcan is the god of two things. He's the god of making things on a very general level, and he's the god of fire. So if you combine those two concepts, you actually have blacksmithery, forging things through fire. And Vulcan is famous for that. Now, there's a bit of information here which we did go through very briefly in lessons, but just to remind you now, earlier on in the book, in fact, not even in book 12, it's in book 8 of the Aeneid, Venus, Aeneas's mum, has approached Vulcan, and she has persuaded him to make God-made, almost impossible to break armor for her son Aeneas. And Aeneas is wearing that at the moment. So it's important you understand that Aeneas has got kind of superhuman God-made armor, in particular a shield, but also other stuff as well. And all spoken about in book 8 is a big passage, actually, really important passage in the book. And as soon as Turnus uses this, kind of man-made sword against Aeneas's Vulcan-made armor, of course there's only one winner, that the sword is going to break. So that's the background there. So after that's happened, the mortalis macro, the mortal sword, desiluit, splintered, just like futilis glacies, just like futile ice, ictu, at the blow. Okay, so that's how that works. Fulva resplendent fragmina hyrena. Okay, again, this is hard because a lot of the words end in A. You have to know what agrees with what. Fulva means kind of bright yellow. Dun-coloured isn't a particularly helpful rendering in English because I've never seen the word dun before. I don't even know if it is a word, although spell check is suggesting it is. Fulva means golden yellow. Okay, it's often used to describe lions and anything that's golden essentially. So fragmina is our nominative, but fulva is agreeing with the hyrena. Okay, so just get your agreements there, and then the sentence makes sense quite easily. The fragmina, that the fragments, i.e. the splintered bits of the sword, the fragments, they resplendent, they sparkle, fulva hyrena, on the bright yellow sand. Okay, so that's how that works. Okay, ergo, therefore, out of his mind, Turnus looks for different pathways, so different escape routes in flight. And now in this way, actually not in this way, let me take that back. So it's more geographical than abstract. So now in this direction, and then in this direction, so it's implying different directions, he weaves uncertain circles. Okay. Undiquenim densa, toico inclusa corona, antiqua. Oh, yeah. Okay. So these next few lines are describing how Turnus is running in circles, or why he's running in circles. It's because there's no escape route. He tries this way and it doesn't work. He tries another way and it doesn't work. These lines tell us why his various attempts are unsuccessful. So, enim. 4 on all sides. The Toikri, the Trojans, inclusere, short for incluserent, they closed him off, with a tightly packed circle. And on one side, a deep marsh surrounds him, and on another, steep city walls surround him. So there are no escape routes. He can't run over the walls, he can't run through a marsh, and he can't run through the Trojans. So he is imprisoned. Okay. Next bit. Nec minus Aeneas quamquam tadata. Okay, yeah. Again, this is quite tricky for similar reasons as the fragments and the sand. You need to kind of understand what is agreeing with what. Tardata and Sagata look as though they agree, but I don't think they do. I think Tardata agrees with Genua. Okay, you can tell from the, just A-level stuff. You can tell from what's called the quantity of the A's. They're not going to be agreeing there. Okay, so Genua and Tardata are agreeing. Sagita is ablative singular, so by an arrow. Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. And the way this sentence is breaking down as well, this is tricky because Aeneas is singular and the main clause is here. This is describing what Aeneas does. Notice how the verbs here are all singular because Aeneas is one person. Once you get into this quam-quam clause and although clause, the verbs become plural. So, let me just get that away. Aeneas is not doing any of the action implied in these lines. He's not the subject of the verbs. He's not governing the verbs. But there is another noun, Genua, which is. So that's kind of on a big picture level how this unravels. But let's go through what it means. And no, because nec is negative, so and no less Aeneas. Although meanwhile his knees, which have been slowed down by an arrow, in other words, slowed down by an arrow wounded by an arrow. So although his knees impedient, impede him, slow him down, and recusant cursum, and are resistant to running, so and object to him running. So although he's injured, in sequitur he pursues, and he fervidus is agreeing with Aeneas. So and he filled with rage urges the foot of the scared one, in other words of Turnus, of scared Turnus, pede with his own foot. Now, if you urge someone's foot with your foot, it means you keep up with them, you keep pace with them. And the English here is saying, breathing hotly and hard upon his desperate foe. Yeah, so in other words, he's within a foot's distance of him. But again, to go back on a very literal level, he urges the foot of scared Turnus with his own foot. That's a literal translation, okay, in case you're wondering how that works. Okay. Hopefully you've got so far so good on that and there's no major issues. The next bit is, in my opinion, without doubt, the hardest bit of the entire passage. So listen up and be very, very clear on what the word order is and what the nominatives are, where the verbs are, where the objects are. This is really, really tough. Veluti si, just as when. Okay, it's another simile. This time, Aeneas is going to be compared to a hunting dog, and whereas before they were both compared to comparable animals, in fact, indistinguishable animals, they were the same bull and you couldn't tell who was going to win. Here the roles are very different. Aeneas is compared to a hunting dog, so very much on the attack. Turnus is compared to a curvum, to a stag, to a male deer, and he's very much on the run. Okay, so there is a complete change of roles here. That's why it's so vivid even. So, just as when, a venator canis, a hunter dog. Very difficult to have a nominative so delayed, but that is the nominative. So just as when, a hunter dog, nactus, and we have to pretend it's nactus est, okay, has acquired, or has closed off. Probably has acquired, actually. Has got is what your English is saying, but has acquired. A stag, that's the accusative, referring to Turnus metaphorically. A stag. The stag is described as inclusum, closed off by a stream, or caged in because of the fear of a purple feather. Okay, your English is saying feathered nets, but puniceus is a colour. It's actually purple or dark kind of mauve, and it was the colour of feathers which hunters used, both in those days, but I believe also in modern practice as well. Don't quote me on that, but I believe so. And the idea is it scares the animals away from that colour, and you can direct where they're going to run, so you can direct animals into traps. That's the thinking behind that. So caged in by the fear, by the fear, punicei peni of the purple feather. So just as when this dog has done that, and it does that, sorry, I've missed out a word. It does that cursu in running, and it follows, so instat, it takes the trail. It's what the English is saying. If you instare, you stand present. So it pursues, I think is the meaning here. Latratibus, with barking. Let me go through that again, just to make sure you understand what's going on. So, just as when. Okay, veluti sic quando go together as a phrase and mean just as when. So just as when, a hunter dog, put the in running in here, has caught a stag, which has been locked in by a river or caged in through its fear of a purple feather, and it, so the dog, pursues with barking. Okay, that's really, really hard, but hopefully that now makes sense. Ille now refers to the stag. So, however, the stag, terrified by the ambush, so by the traps, by the snares, and by the high riverbank, flees and reflees 1,000 routes. So it runs and runs again in 1,000 different ways. Okay. But the keen-spirited Umbrian dog. Your text is saying hound. There isn't a word for canis here. Umber is that word. An Umbrian dog was in Roman times. They basically produced or had a reputation for producing the best hunting dogs. So, but the keen-spirited hunting dog sticks to the trail, okay, heans, with its mouth wide open. That's what heans means. Again and again, it snatches, so it bites. And similar to one holding, so as if it has caught it, is what the English is saying here. So as if it had it is corresponding to similis tenenti. Okay, so similar to one holding, as if he had it. So as if he had it, he makes a sound with his jaws, and elusus est, he has been, and this is all referring to the dog, of course, and he has been tricked, he has been eluded by an empty, inanis is empty, so by an empty morsu, bite. Okay, right, that's pretty tricky as well. I did warn you. Then, indeed, a shout rises up, and the riverbanks and the marshes echo around, and the whole sky thunders with noise. He, and this is now referring to Turnus, so I would put Turnus in here if I were you. So he, fleeing at the same time, increpat, so he barks, literally, he kind of crackles at all of the rutili by name, and calling them, and he burns for a sword which is known. Okay, now that's a bit jumbled and it didn't quite make sense in English, so let's go back and refine it so you have a translation. So I'm going to translate ille as Turnus, but that man is literally what it means. So that man, fleeing simultaneously as he barks upon all of the rutili by name, calls on each of them, and he demands the use of a sword which is known. We then get on to line 60. Aeneas is now our nominative. So that's what Turnus is doing. He's desperate for a sword. Remember, his is broken. He's trying to run away. Even though Aeneas is wounded, Aeneas is going to catch up with him. And, you know, if Aeneas catches up with him, he's dead. So, you know, there's a real fear factor going on here. Okay, so right, Aeneas. This is now describing what he's doing. Aeneas, opposite, and praesens, on the scene, present. He threatens two things. He threatens death and exitium, and destruction. Okay, so he offers death and threatens destruction if anyone approaches. And he terrorizes the trembling, again, this is referring to the rutili, so you need to put in a noun here, because otherwise he terrorizes the trembling doesn't quite make sense. Sounds like a kind of a slightly dodgy indie band, which we obviously don't have here. So and he terrorizes the trembling rutili. Minitans, repeatedly threatening. Make sure you have the repeatedly or over and over again. So minitans is what's called a frequentative form. Okay, so repeatedly threatening and then we need to put in a kind of a say. This is a really hard to spot indirect statement. Okay, so repeatedly threatening that he will destroy their city, and he pushes on injured. Okay, I think things do get a little bit easier now, which is a relief. So hang on, quinque orbis explent cursu. Yeah, okay. So they fill 5 circles. They run around 5 times, but they fill 5 circles, cursu, in running, and they retrace totidem, the same number, this way and that way. 4. Unimportant or laughable rewards are not being sought, but they are fighting over the life of Turnus and over the blood of Turnus. Okay, pretty vivid and pretty exciting. That comes to the point where there's a huge gap in the text, and what happens then is Aeneas is going to approach Turnus. They have a discussion. Aeneas is pretty brazen in his approach. Turnus gives away signs that he's scared. He's doing his best not to admit that, at least not to Aeneas. And then supernatural happenings step in to decide the fate of the 2 men. Hopefully that made sense. Enjoy this one, and I'll catch you in the next video.